What's up guys, today we're going to be looking at how I made this artwork. Let's get started. So I had a vague idea of what I wanted to make, but it wasn't super precise. So I went over to Pinterest and looked at some inspiration. I don't always do this, but if I'm kind of not exactly sure what I want to make, I think it can really help me refine my idea. So next up, I opened up Photoshop and did a quick little sketch just to get my idea out there. So as you can see, I wanted to really focus on the eye and the tear coming out and have the light hit that part and then the rest of the image be in darkness. So at this point I was ready to start, so I opened up DAW Studio and got myself a model. You can download these from the DAW store. So I imported it and then did the posing. So I just moved the eyes around and then tweaked the eyebrows and forehead to give her a bit of a sad expression. Once I was done, I exported it to Blender using the Dash to Blender add-on and then got started on making my scene. Alright, so from here I'm just gonna take my final project and do a bit of a breakdown. So let's start with the eye. I ended up deleting the eye that was included with the DAZ model and replaced it with this eye from a model I got on ArtStation. Because it's a higher quality eye. So as you can see, we've got different meshes for each part of the eye. For the cornea, it's just a basic specular material. The caruncula, which is this little part right here, it's the same material as the sclera. Then the iris, I ended up actually only using this albedo map, which was provided with the model. I also added a bit of transmission by mixing blue and black, because I only wanted the transmission on the iris and not the pupil. And to mix these two, I used this as a mask, which I made real quick in Photoshop. I also used this to control the roughness. So I want the iris to have less roughness than the pupil. And finally, a random walk going into medium to get that nice subsurface scattering on the iris. Next up, the meniscus, which is the tear. It's just specular material again. And finally, the sclera. I just used the maps that were provided with the albedo and displacement, and made my own opacity map to get a nice transition with the iris. So that's it for the eye. Next up, the hair. I ended up, let's hide this. The eyebrows I used from the same model from which I got the eye. The eyelashes I got from a CG Cookie human model. You can obviously make these yourself, but I just didn't feel like spending the time on it, so I used pre-made ones. I just had to move them around a bit so they stuck to the surface of my model. As for the material, you can use the hair material, but I don't really like it, so I just used a universal material, set the albedo to black, and played with the roughness and specular to get the result I wanted. Next up, the actual face. So as you can see, let's get rid of this. First off, I've got some transmission, the salmon color to get the subsurface scattering, and of course a medium as well. I ended up making my own hand-painted mask for the subsurface, so to get more subsurface around the eyes, nose, lips, and cheeks. And then, let's see here, the albedo, I started with a map from DAZ, and then mixed in some more, so I did some basic color correction first, make it a bit darker, more saturated, and then mixed in a bit darker areas around the eyes, nose, lips, and cheeks. And then also added some blush on the cheeks here. That's my albedo. Roughness and specular. You can see I did a bunch of stuff. I started with this map, again from Daz, and then ended up with a specular map that looks like this. So I made everything brighter and added even more bright areas, again using that same mask, and a little bit more up here. As for the roughness, this is my final roughness map. So same idea, I use that same mask again to make it less rough around the areas where I wanted more reflection, so on the cheeks here. And that's it. And then I've got my displacement map, which, yeah, we can't really see much. We can barely see it around here, but displacement maps are usually very subtle when you look at them like this. Here we go. So this is what it looks like without displacement. And then I sculpted all the skin details by hand in Zbrush. If you want to learn how to do that, go check out this tutorial by Jay Hill. That's where I learned how to do it, and I'm definitely not good enough to be teaching you guys how to do it, so check that one out. Let's look at the lights, real quick. So this is my lighting setup. I've got two areas here, and then a bunch of gobos or light blockers. You can see if I take them off, this is what it looks like. So I'm using nice and large area lights to get really soft lighting, and then add the gobos to block off the light on either side. For these, just a simple plane. Make sure the albedo is set to black and specular to 0. That way you don't get any light bouncing back onto your model from these. And then this here. So the way I made this is I rendered out an image of what I had so far, threw it into Photoshop, and made a bunch of different sketches until I found something I was happy with, and then went back to Blender and just modeled it. So what I like to do for this is just add a plane and a shrink wrap modifier. That way everything sticks to the surface of your model. And then once you have your shape done, you can add a subdivision solidify modifier to give it thickness, and then more subdivision, and you can play around with the order and magnitude of the subdivision to get the result you want. Now, a problem I ran into with this is that if I go to my world here and take it out, this is what it looks like, because it's a chrome material, so it reflects what's around it, and obviously there's not much to reflect here except for these lights. So it looked really dark and I didn't like it. So what I did is added a little bit of environment texture, right, using an HDRI. But since I only wanted it to affect this mesh and not the other ones, I selected everything else, went here to Octane settings and unticked this environment light pass. That way the environment would not light these other meshes. And that's it. That's it for everything I did in Blender. Now let's move on to Photoshop for compositing and post-processing. Alright, here we're in Photoshop. This is my final image, so let's have a look at what I did. This is the base render I did, right? And then I did another render with more specular highlights because I thought it looked a bit dull, so I painted that in. And I also did another render with a softer displacement. So as you can see on the left of the face there, I thought the displacement was just a bit too strong, so I painted that in to make it a bit more subtle. And then the eye. So obviously in this render the eye is way too dark and I wanted it to pop more, so I did another render adding another light hitting straight on the eye to make it brighter, and then just painted that in like so. Added a hue saturation to make it slightly more saturated, and then just general post-processing, a curves layer to make everything a bit brighter, exposure to darken the edges, kind of like a vignette, and another exposure to brighten everything up. And that's my final image. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, drop a comment and I'll do my best to answer them. Sorry about the voice, I'm a little bit sick, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.